I think I have a new favorite arrangement of that song. Hello, everyone. I'm Pastor Bob Miller, and let me add my welcome to you all. It's great to be worshiping together with you, however you are connecting to be in worship with one heart this day. Today, we continue our Easter season sermon series called Saving Grace, where we are looking at practical quality of life application of some foundational biblical teachings, particularly from the Wesleyan value and Christian perspective. And the Sunday evening study that's taking place in parallel with the sermon series that Pastor Susie talked about just a few minutes ago is doing that with a particular focus on personal financial well-being. Absolutely a significant aspect of quality of life, wouldn't you agree? Anyway, one of the principles woven into that study is recognition of the world's proficiency at tempting us into things that could ultimately lead us into difficulty, sometimes a great deal of difficulty. And from a financial wellness perspective, the consumer culture of our society is one such area. Advertisers, they capitalize on our consumer culture in that their aim is to convince us that the item or the product that they're advertising is something that we really want, or better yet, something that we really need for one reason or another. And that's not to say that the item that they're advertising is bad, or that them advertising that item is wrong. Not at all. But if we are not careful and we fall victim to that arousal, we can get ourselves into some pretty big trouble. But that advertising can be relentless, especially, I think emails are the worst. Because depending on the time of year, there can be literally dozens of emails that find their way into my inbox advertising sales. Now, I'm pretty good at being able to judge those emails by looking at the subject line and discerning if it's a sale email, and I just delete them before I even look at them, except for sales of tools. In particular, a specific brand of tool from a particular big box home improvement store. Now, I won't mention the name of the tool or the brand, but their high-end tools always come in a specific color, which is usually quite a spirited conversation with my two sons who use tools every day in their work. Tools are like farm tractors. You can tell who manufactured them by the color of them, right? Well, anyway, one of my sons favors the high-end tools that come in red. Another one of my sons favors the ones that are turquoise in colors. But for my purposes, I got this thing for the orange ones. Now, they're good. I mean, you get a lifetime warranty, even the batteries. And there's no questions asked. You just take it back. They always do a really good job. And so if an email with that particular brand name is in the subject line, I never delete it without first checking to see if a particular tool or item happens to be on sale. An item that I want, or that I need. And I say want, because while I may not need it right now, you know I will eventually need it. I mean, I already have a project list that calls for that tool that I'll eventually use. And if it's a pretty good sale, I can't get it out of my mind. I mean, do I really want that particular model? Should I spring for that tool now? But by capitalizing on that sale, especially if it's a really good sale. I won't run the risk of having to buy that tool at the regular price, or not getting that special lifetime warranty that comes only certain times a year. Or worse, not being able to even get the tool, it not even being available when I might need it. There's some satisfaction in knowing that I already have that tool in my possession. Okay, I confess, I am susceptible to consumer culture, at least as it relates to those orange battery-operated tools. But admittedly, the thought has crossed my mind. Do I obsess over the purchase of those tools? I mean, it does sort of dominate my thinking for the time that I'm researching and rationalizing whether I should get that next tool. Now, it's just a tool, and I eventually get my feet back on the ground. But you see, that's where the ground upon which we are standing can start to get a little loose. It happens whenever something of this world becomes the overwhelming priority. And there's a lot of things that can find their way into that space. I mean, we just talked about how advertising works to tempt us into a lot of things. But there's also just the responsibilities of life. The bills, the house, the car. There's our longing for and our need to rejuvenate. Must-watch TV programs, vacations, downtime. Now, these are all realities of life, and they're not bad or wrong things, but they also so often can serve to dominate our time, our resources, our thoughts. None of these are evil, bad, or wrong in and of themselves until they begin to rival God for what one really trusts, for what one really loves. What I mean is, these things we obsess over can start to occupy a higher place in our minds and in our hearts than our efforts to dwell first on our relationship with God. And anything that occupies a higher place in our hearts or in our lives than God is by definition an idol. Now, idols, biblically speaking, are images or objects created by man, by humanity. Objects that take the place of God. And they serve to draw our primary worship off of God. That's what idolatry is. It is worshiping something created by the hands of man, of humanity. In many ways, you can think of it as misplaced trust. Trust in something or someone other than God. Could be money, could be toys, could be our intellect. I guess it could even be tools. And again, it's not the thing so much as it is us foundationally relying more on that thing than God. It is a rival to God. Now we say, Pastor, we would never do that. I say, Bob, we would never do that. We would never put anything higher than God. But the thing is, things can so easily become that way, effectively becoming idols. For example, we make sure that we watch that show on Netflix, but don't necessarily make time for daily devotionals. Or we can bask in the accomplishments of our intellect or our talents while never realizing or being genuinely, deeply grateful to God for who gave us that intellect or those talents to begin with. An even tougher one to see coming at you is when we find ourselves consumed by the fear of a difficult situation or a looming threat, but we don't make dedicated time to sit with God, seeking and listening for God's counsel for what we may do about it. And so often we don't necessarily see these things as a problem, as idolatry, because the world doesn't want us to see it that way. The world is set up to get us to idolatry, not to point it out. But such idols are indeed a problem. Why? Well, for starters, God commanded us to not go there. The very first of the 10 commandments. Do not make an idol for yourself, no form whatsoever, of anything in the sky above or on the earth below or in the waters under the earth. Do not bow down to them or worship them, because I, the Lord your God, am a passionate God. Now, admittedly, it's pretty easy to stay away from golden calves or pagan statues. But catching our desires or even fears before they take that top spot, well, that can be a bit more challenging. How or where we are allocating our attention, our energy, our pursuit of happiness. John Wesley, the founder of modern Methodism, he writes this: To him, therefore, him, God, therefore alone our heart is due, and he will not quit his claim or consent to its being given to any other. He is continually saying to every child of man, my son, give me thy heart. And to give our heart to any other is plain idolatry. Accordingly, whatever takes our heart from him, from God, or shares it with him is an idol. Or in other words, whatever we seek happiness in, independent of God. But another problem with idols is that they offer false satisfaction or false contentment. Like when money or wealth is one's idol, what is one's reason for living, we know that's ultimately fruitless, right? How's that saying go? You can't take... How's it go? Can't take it with you. Yeah, that's how it goes. But also the idol's pervasive message that just a little more is all we need to get us there, to get us where we want to be, it only leads to greater and greater thirst. Sarah Young of the Jesus Calling fame, she writes this: people seek satisfaction in a vast variety of hurtful ways, many of which are addicting. Even good things can fail to satisfy you if you don't elevate them above, let me read that again. Even good things can fail to satisfy you if you elevate them above God. Finding your satisfaction in God above all else provides a firm foundation for your life. Oh, that idol might offer a temporary high, so to speak, but it's not real and substantive contentment. In Matthew's Sermon on the Mount, Jesus teaches, do not store up for yourselves. I'll read that one. I have a different translation here. Stop collecting treasures for your own benefit on earth, where moth and rust eat them and where thieves break in and steal them. Instead, collect treasures for yourself in heaven, where moth and rust don't eat them and where thieves don't break in and steal them. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. You see, a big takeaway here is that only God is permanent. Only God is immutable, will not change. Only God lasts forever. And while the world in which we live is proficient at tempting us into effectively idolizing the things of this world, our real life comes through our top priority and greatest love being centered on God, our one true source of life, now and forever. And idolizing those things of this world is not so much about the physical thing. It's about our attitudes, our priorities, the values that guide our thinking. It's about where we place our ultimate trust. It's about with whom our principles and purposes are intentionally aligned. For contentment is not something that's related to a particular possession or circumstance or even particular amount of money. Rather, contentment is an inward attitude, a serenity that comes from doing the right and faithful thing and trusting God to see it through. Bottom line, God is our real source of satisfaction, of contentment, of joy. And those gifts are the tangible outcomes of God's love in action upon and within us. That is, they are the tangible outcomes of God's grace at work in our lives. That's how God honors our trusting and following God's principles. Okay, so how do we guard against the world's attempts to tempt us with false promises or the allure of idols? Well, we do it by acknowledging and submitting ourselves to a more powerful source, the faithful way of God. Very specifically, every day is filled with thousands of decisions. Many of them are relatively small, sometimes imperceptibly small. Sometimes they're big decisions. But we can strive to make every single one of them on the basis of prayerful consideration of what God would have us do. We can make it a priority to start each day, maybe even before we get out of bed, by asking God to direct our thinking, to lead you in the way that God would want you to go. And then throughout the day, pause and consciously, even audibly, ask God to be in the center of whatever task that might be in front of you or whatever decision you may be facing. Make God, make the Holy Spirit, make Jesus the center of everything in your life. And in all things, as a follower of Christ, be grateful to God. Make sure, as your head hits the pillow every night, to give thanks to God for all the ways that God has enabled and sustained you that day. Returning once again to John Wesley's sermon, you can do all things through Christ that strengthened or strengtheneth you. Do valiantly and stand fast in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made you free. Yea, go on in his name and in the power of his might, till you know all that love of God that passeth knowledge. My good friends, may it be so. Amen. Amen.